Charlotte, and this is Time Emma Tries to Read. I've set up the most dangerous tripod. Not dangerous to me, but if I move even an inch to one side or the other, the whole thing's going to come down. So if I look very sort of a little bit wooden, that is why. I'm going to do a little review video now. I'm in bed because it's that kind of week. Got very low energy. I have done loads of reading and got some controversial thoughts on some books and some exciting thoughts on some other books. So I'm going to start with The Old Ways. I don't know if this is the right side to hold it. The Old Ways by Robert Macfarlane. And if my nails are dirty, it's because I've been gardening. This is a journey on foot. Now, loads of people have been going on about Underland, which is his newest book, and really, really loving it. So I went into this knowing that this was one of his early books. It's not his first book, but it's one of 3 that he wrote about the land and walking. And this one specifically is about paths. It sounds right up my street. It's all about following tracks, holloways, drove roads and sea paths, and the places and journeys which inspire and inhabit our imaginations. So from what I know, Macfarlane is a literature professor in, I think, somewhere like King's College, somewhere really, really good. And there's a lot of literature that runs all the way through it. He's madly in love with the outside world, which is also really, really good. He quite literally goes out and sleeps beside the road. You know, he is literally under hedgerows, he sleeps on top of burial mounds. You know, he really sort of inhabits the soul of like a vagabond or what have you. But I gotta say, in the first third of the book, I really, really struggled, and I more or less put everyone off around me from ever reading Macfarlane. So I feel heavily responsible for turning people away from his writing, because I literally was just like, I can't do it anymore. I was sending screenshots of some of the passages that I just found really painful, and yeah, people were getting back to me going, yeah, stop, just stop. And I was thinking, what are other people reading when they're reading and saying they love him? Because I was, like I said, I was struggling, and I'll qualify why I was struggling. I felt that he was trying so hard to convey what he was seeing that sometimes like the metaphor got away from him, and there were really awkward things like at one point he compares seals that he is swimming amongst to like the swollen anoraks of murder victims. That's pretty much word for word what he says. And I was like, how many murder victims have you seen? Isn't that a weird image to conjure up when you're talking about seals? And he wasn't scared. It's stuff like that made me just sort of think, what am I meant to get from this? It was sort of try hard, and a lot of, and I know, like, who am I to talk in the sense of I'm not a writer, but some of the stuff was trying so hard to be innovative and new, and you know, get you there in the moment, that I felt it was just off. There's another bit where he talks about a grouse, and a grouse is a black bird with kind of red above its eyes, and he calls it something like a drag queen slur of red above each eye. Did not like. So that's a couple of examples. Like, there's more than that. But then the other side of it is that he is so passionate, and that's why he's using all this language, because he wants to try and convey to you why it's, you know, why nature is amazing. About a third of the way through, I started to play a game, which got me back into the book, which was I started to count all the men that he comes across in his travels and that he mentions as writers or people who have written books on walking. And I started to count all the women. And you can see where this is headed. Now, I'm not saying that Macfarlane is, you know, anti-women or an anti-feminist at all. I'm just putting him in the wider picture of what we know is, you know, a patriarchal society. And I'm also thinking about Mason Curry, the gentleman who wrote the book that I've been telling you about with all the writers, and how his first collection ended up being 17% female, and how his second collection was in order to readdress that. And he said, you know, I don't understand how that happened. And I kind of feel like a similar thing has happened to Macfarlane. I don't think in any sense that he was trying to avoid women. But once you once you're talking about a male writer, or once you're meeting another male artist, he meets a lot of artists and people who work off the land, you know, make sculptures and what have you. They're going to then talk about men, and then it's just spirals. So, for example, in one chapter, which was by no means an unusual chapter, there are 40 individual men mentioned and 4 women. So it's like that. And that actually became quite fun for me, and it got me enjoying the book again. And then once I'd gotten past the 50% mark, I started to find that I was actually really enjoying it for what it was. And I'd gotten used to his style and his kind of overblown metaphors. And I'd also stopped being annoyed at him for leaving his family to do all this walking, because that was the other thing that got on my nerves, was that the very first scene, he goes out in the middle of the night and he walks in the virgin snow and he leaves his family sleeping. And I'm like, who is with his children? And again, I know you might think, wow, picky, but when you're a woman and you feel like you're part of the landscape, and I do feel like I've inhabited any landscape I've been near, and then you see a landscape very much devoid of women, and then the man who's telling it to you has pretty much left his family to be looked after by his wife while he goes and gets in the landscape as well, and he's talking about farmers and drovers and all this kind of stuff. You're just like, well, where's the other 51%, you know? So yeah, I got over that. Again, you know, I'm not saying it's McFarlane's fault. And then I did start to really enjoy it. And the last third of the book I loved, and it rekindled my love of Edward Thomas, who's the poet that he's kind of in awe of. And so, to conclude a very long review, I would recommend this book. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts. I'm a little bit scared. I might avoid the comments for a couple of days just in case you're all mad at me. But yeah, that's what I thought. Then I decided to really juxtapose it straight away with a book about nature that was written by a woman. So we've got Nancy Campbell. This is The Library of Ice. I don't know if you can see that cover tidy in this light. Maybe I shouldn't have sat near a window. The Library of Ice, readings from a cold climate. So the thing that links all this book together is ice. So she'll talk about anything from bowls to ice houses that were all the rage in Europe. She'll talk about the Arctic. She'll talk about the history of the world and how the ice cores, you know, can show us about all the climate. She talks about climate a fair bit, but not overly. All in all, it's an amazing book. And what I loved about her is that almost towards the end, she kind of let slip that she can't drive. And as someone that can't drive, I found that awesome, that she's traveled all over the world in search of ice and gone to these incredible places, but she can't drive. So it gave me hope. I really loved it. And lo and behold, there were way more women. I didn't count them. I didn't underline them at first, but I'd gotten a bit bored of doing that in the McFarlane, so I wasn't going to go crazy on it again. Just tons more, way more than probably 51%. And you might say, well, that's her sexism. I don't think so. I think she is very clever. I think she sought out a lot of women, and it was a side of nature that I wanted to see. So I really loved it. Fascinating facts in there as well. Now for my second controversial review of the video is Night Waking by Sarah Moss. Loads of you guys told me to read this last year when I was talking about how Idris doesn't sleep, and there's a reason that I'm tired mama. He still doesn't really sleep. It's probably why I'm very low energy and a bit blue at the minute, because we're not getting any adult time. It's he's up till 10 last night, and he kicked me all night. So the bed that I'm in right now is a king. I think it's a king. It's definitely not a double, which I end up sharing with him pretty much every night. So Night Waking seemed right up my street. It's about a woman who's isolated on an island whilst her husband researches puffins. She's an academic in her own right, and she's been sort of duped by her husband to go over there because she'll get lots of writing done. But when you've got 2 small children, no, you won't get any writing done. You won't get anything done. So I think I gave it 60 pages. I know. I think, again, let's take ourselves back to the hunting party and the fact that I couldn't cope with them being posh. I think there's an element of that. She seems quite posh. There's lots of people with names like Camilla. Her children are called Raphael and Timothy. And I know that is me being the opposite of snobbish, but it feels like a world I can't get on board with. And when you're making jokes about Somalian children, which is what she's very, very caustic, the narrator, and it is funny, some of it, and I can see what Sarah Moss is trying to do. But when you're making jokes about Somali children, and then also I think, and there's a really awkward scene with the Twin Towers, which again, I kind of know what she was trying to do, but it did not work for me. And I'd be interested to know your thoughts on that, because I feel like this is the sort of thing where people will get really annoyed about and go, oh, but you don't understand, that was meant to be funny or ironic or blah, blah, blah. But I personally just couldn't. You have to be distanced from those things to make them funny. And the Twin Towers thing wasn't meant to be funny, but it was certainly not serious. Yeah. Just, if you haven't read the book, you're probably mortified now. But it is, you can, when you actually read it, you can see why she's put it in. Basically, her son makes a model of the Twin Towers and then crashes planes into them. And yeah, just feel like that's too close to living memory to do that without putting a serious narrative aside in. But anyway, I can see that the camera is wobbling. I'm really sorry. I had to stop. And I think it was just that it's not right for me right now. It's about finding a baby skeleton in the garden, which again is a difficult thing for me to read about. So I don't know. I know some of you loved it, and I know loads of you love Sarah Moss, so I'm really sorry. I went straight from that. So I haven't really read any fiction, because that was my fiction thing, and then I couldn't do it. So I went straight from that to The Overstory by Richard Powers, and I finished that this morning. It is a whopper. I mean, it looks big, but it doesn't look 650 pages big, which it pretty much is. So I was a bit taken aback, and the writing is really small. I mean, you know, I could have read 3 books in the time it took me to read this, but this was another game changer for me. And I could go into this in massive detail. I feel like I want to give an impromptu seminar on this book, because there's loads going on. But what I will say is loads of reviews, because I kind of felt that this would split people down the middle, and it does by the look of it. I've looked on Amazon and Goodreads and stuff and read a few reviews. And the theme I'm spotting is that people like the first part, which is, I don't know, is it 12, maybe less, kind of short stories on different characters in America. Most of them immigrants. I mean, all of them are immigrants in one way or another, but I mean like first generation. And they're really amazing. Like the insight he has into different cultures. Again, white man writing about other cultures. What's that all about? But he does it really well. And I don't think anyone's complained about how he's done it. There's a way that he's done it that is inoffensive, I feel. But again, I'd be interested if anybody felt differently. It felt genuine. It felt like he'd not stuck to kind of typical things that you would expect. They were awesome. And loads of people on the internet said they were awesome as well. When it moves from those 12 stories and starts to incorporate the trees, I think is where people started to give up on it a little bit. Ooh, sounded like someone knocking. Maybe not give up on it, but people got confused. I think people felt that it started to get a little bit too preachy, because it's about trees and the fact that they're dying across the world. But it's so funny. If you, I don't know how many of those people read all the way to the end, because the tree portion is very long, but somewhere around about here, Richard Powers makes a comment about how what no great novelist can do is write a novel that gets people as excited about trees and the devastation that's happening to them as they are about characterization. And that really cracked me up, because he totally, he's very aware of what he's done here and the controversial way that he's done it. He's aware of the fact that some people aren't going to give a shit. And he kind of says, I've done my best. And he does that all from another character's point of view that is not even a novelist. So it's very, very clever. He's too smart. I'm really frightened of him. He knows a lot about trees. It's just awe-inspiring. And I do feel like you could divide the people that have loved this or have felt that it was a bit meh into people who love nature more than they love humans, and people who love humans more than they love nature, or are apathetic about nature. I think if you love nature and you love trees in particular, you will love this book and you will read it to the end and be in awe and you'll want to go out and do something. If you love people and you're still buying takeaway coffees and not really caring about the fact that they're creating landfill, then you're probably going to get annoyed by the tree bit and just be like, oh, stop preaching. And that's that is your God-given right as a human being to feel that way. So I'm not going to argue against that. There are some elements of it that are a little bit trite, I suppose. The women in it are amazingly strong. Like all of the women characters are really the lead characters and the men are all second to them. But there are ways in which some of them have maybe been a bit over-sexualized or almost made too, I don't know, a bit too unreal, if you know what I mean. Like they're idolized to the point where they're not actually real people anymore. So there's little things that are wrong with it, but on the whole, I just can't quite believe that somebody wrote this. And I feel inspired, changed. I feel like I'm on a path. I feel like I'm on a path. I've read the book about Britain and myths and women rooting themselves in British myth. I've read this. What was the other one that I read that made me think about the environment? I can't remember now. But yeah, I feel like I'm on this pathway and I will keep you posted. So that's it. Those are my reviews, end of January wrap up. And I'm going to do a quick video now on some of the books that have come into my home. And I haven't bought that many of them, I promise. So let me know. There's loads of stuff to talk about. So I'll see you in the comments.